Told another mom about creepy vibes from my daughter's friend's stepdad, and now it's causing chaos among the parents. Our house has always been kind of the place where all the kids gather. Alina, my daughter, doesn't have a huge circle of friends, but she's close to the one she has, and our home is always open to them as long as everyone helps themselves to snacks and keeps the noise to a minimum. Sleepovers, playdates, even hosting some of her friends' birthday celebrations if Alina's social group is together, they are usually at our place. It's familiar, and it works for us. A couple of weeks ago, Alina came to me with a twist. She wanted to sleep over at her friend Kennedy's house. The next day, Kennedy's family was hosting a party, and Kennedy could invite a friend. I didn't see any issue. I'd met Kennedy's mom. She works in the school office and had always been polite when picking up Kennedy. I agreed without a second thought. But everything changed the moment I brought Alina over for the sleepover. Kennedy's stepdad answered the door, and I swear I've never felt so immediately disturbed by someone. I can't even put my finger on what it was. My stomach twisted, alarms blared in my head, and I instantly felt the need to interact with him longer, to force a conversation and read him better. Standing on the porch, I tried to make small talk. While we chatted, he cracked open an alcoholic drink right there in my presence and slipped straight into this weirdly flirtatious attitude, questioning if I could possibly be old enough to have a teenage daughter. He asked about Alina's age more than once and commented awkwardly about how much we looked alike. Then, right in front of me, he barked at Kennedy to change out of her shorts inside her own house, no less. Thankfully, Kennedy's mother came home partway through, which brought me the smallest bit of relief. I left, but the second I got home, I told my husband that he'd be picking Alina up that evening. There was no way she was spending the night there. We told Kennedy's family there had been a forgotten commitment for the next day, collected Alina before dinner, and brought her home. No regrets. Maybe people think I'm paranoid for acting on nothing but gut feeling, but where I grew up, you never ignored your instincts. My husband fully agreed. Alina would not be spending time at Kennedy's house again, end of story. Last week, while waiting for pickup at school, I ran into another mom I'm friendly with, whose daughter is also in Alina's orbit. She mentioned that she hadn't seen Alina at Kennedy's party that Sunday. I explained Alina hadn't slept over. When she asked if anything was wrong, I was honest. I told her the stepdad made me extremely uncomfortable, detailed my interaction, the way he'd behaved. She thanked me for telling her, said she'd probably handle it the same way I did. I didn't think about it much after that. But yesterday, at pickup, everything came crashing back. Kennedy's mom came outside and confronted me directly. She told me that another mom was no longer letting her daughter visit because of males in the house without the mother home, and that she knew I was responsible since I was the one who had met her husband. She accused me of lying about the reason for picking Alina up early, called me a snob for supposedly judging her family because Kennedy attends on free tuition thanks to her mom's job at the school, and insinuated I look down on where they live. None of that's remotely true, but no matter how I tried to explain, it clearly didn't matter. And there I was, caught flat-footed. First, I didn't want to cause a public scene. Second, I realized to her, snob probably sounded better than the truth, that her husband seemed predatory to me. Then she told me I was isolating Kennedy by poisoning the other mom's view. And maybe that's not entirely wrong. If the situation were reversed, if some other mother felt as creeped out as I did, I would want her to tell me. That's the whole reason I shared my experience, because I'd want to know if I were in her shoes. We're all just trying our best to keep our kids safe. Still, Kennedy's mom looked more deeply hurt than furious. I get how mortifying this could feel for her, and I have to admit, there's no evidence this man actually did anything wrong. All I had was an intense, inexplicable feeling. Now, I can't help but wonder, did I go too far by sharing my gut instinct? Did I owe the whole family an apology? Or did I do the right thing, even without proof? Let me start by clearing up one of the lingering questions. How did Kennedy's mom, I'll call her Sarah, know it was her husband that I had concerns about? After talking things through with my husband and getting a detailed account of what happened when he went to pick up Alina that night, it became clear. He'd implied fairly strongly that we were unhappy with how Sarah's husband had behaved. So it wasn't that Sarah instantly knew her husband was the problem. But my husband mentioned that the moment Sarah opened the door, she looked like she knew she was going to have to deal with some kind of issue. Make of that what you will. I hate to think that any woman could sense something amiss with her husband and willfully ignore it, but time and again, that proves to be reality. Another thread to this story involved my friend Amy. She had been the one to first ask me questions about the sleepover, and it turns out she, too, got weird vibes from Kennedy's stepdad. She told me that when she dropped her daughter off, it was Sarah at the door. But when Amy returned for pickup, Sarah stepped out back, and Amy saw the stepdad talking with one of the cousins, a teenage girl. She was so unsettled by his body language that she later realized something wasn't right. Amy's daughter had already described him as a weirdo who made inappropriate jokes and demanded hugs and physical affection from everyone, including his stepchildren and their cousins. Hearing that, Amy apologized for having mentioned me when Sarah called her to discuss the girls' school project plans at their house. She admitted she'd felt put on the spot, but knowing that I shared her feelings about the stepdad made her trust her own gut about not sending her daughter there again. Amy decided to create a group chat with the other parents and send out a message about her experience. She asked if I'd be willing to share what happened to us as well, to corroborate her account. I took a while to think it through, but in the end I agreed. I avoided sharing vague vibes. I stuck to the facts of what actually happened when I dropped Alina off. I didn't even say that we picked her up early. I figure, if the truth makes someone look bad, that's on them. Parents deserve to have all the information to decide what's right for their children. Personally, I would want to be kept in the loop if the roles were reversed. It didn't spiral into a gossip session. Each parent thanked us for speaking up, said they'd think it all through, and we left it at that. Everyone seemed to understand why we did what we did. I did end up texting Sarah to explain everything directly. I prefer texting in these situations, so I have a written record. I let her know I had no issue with their home or neighborhood. But her husband's behavior made me uneasy, and I thought she'd understand that a mother's concern for her child isn't something to brush off lightly. At the same time, I acknowledged that she might totally disagree with my view, which is why I didn't want to make it a huge thing. I reiterated that Kennedy is always welcome at our house, that she's a lovely girl, and that I hope Sarah could understand. I apologized for any misunderstanding as well. Sarah's response wasn't what I'd hoped for. She simply said that Kennedy would no longer be coming to our house because she wasn't comfortable with her daughter being in my care. I told her I hoped she'd reconsider, and that Kennedy would always have a place here, but I left it at that. I can't say I'd feel differently if someone accused my husband of something like that, though my husband has never behaved as hers has, so it's a moot point. Since then, Kennedy hasn't been over. Alina tells me they're still friends and that neither of them blames the other for the drama. I am so proud of how mature Alina's been through all of this. But, obviously, it's a bit tougher now when Alina's friends come over for weekends. Kennedy can't be there. Just this past weekend, the girls had a sleepover. When did girls start having racing watch parties, anyway? And Alina and I put together a party favor bag for Kennedy to give her at school, so she wouldn't feel left out. If I'm being brutally honest, I don't know if this arrangement can last. As wonderful and resilient as the girls are, the reality is Kennedy is missing out on more and more. It breaks my heart that this has affected her social life, but I don't know that it was avoidable. At the end of the day, the truth is that Sarah and I just don't trust each other with our kids. It really is as simple and as complicated as that. And to be equally honest, I still don't know if the stepdad really is a danger. My husband looked into it, found no record of anything concerning children. Maybe he's just a chauvinist, the kind of man who always needs a hug and makes inappropriate comments without realizing or caring how gross or uncomfortable that is. There's a whole spectrum between harmless and dangerous, and I don't pretend to know quite where he lands. But, in the end, I can sleep at night knowing that I did my part. I stood up for what I felt was right, and I won't ever have to face a mother I've known for years and realize I failed to say something if something terrible did happen. Maybe that means I have to make peace with being labeled a gossipy busybody, but I can live with that, if it means I protected my child and, hopefully, others. Update 2. Friday night, everything shifted again. Alina had a couple of girls over for that race watch party they are all weirdly into. We were making nachos, the house smelled like cheese, and then Alina came into the kitchen with her phone pressed to her chest and a look I've only seen on her face a handful of times. "Mom, Kennedy says can she come here? Like now?" It was already after 10. She followed it up in a rush. Her stepdad has friends over. They're drinking. He keeps making them all do the hug tax to get snacks, and he told her to change because men are around. She said she doesn't want to be there. I asked for the phone. Kennedy had sent a string of messages, each more frantic than the last, and a photo of their living room, beer bottles on the coffee table, a ball game on, at least 4 men I didn't recognize, all older than me. She said her mom was at a school event and not answering. I called Sarah immediately. Straight to voicemail. I texted her that Kennedy was asking to come to our house and to call me back. I told her I would not move a muscle without letting her know. There's some invisible line between meddling and doing what you'd want another adult to do for your kid. If she ever said I don't feel safe. My husband and I didn't debate it for long. He grabbed his keys. I took screenshots of the texts, called the non-emergency line for our police department and asked, very plainly, What would be the least dramatic way to handle it while protecting everyone? The dispatcher's answer was about as measured as my question. If a minor has asked to leave a house because she feels unsafe due to intoxicated adults, document your communications with the guardian, pick her up if she can't step out without altercation, and if anything at all feels off, call 911 from your car. We told Kennedy to meet us on the corner by the stop sign, one street overlit, with an eyeshot of 2 porches with cameras, and away from the front door. Alina insisted on coming, and I let her, because I knew Kennedy might feel braver seeing a friend. We rolled up with our hazards on. Kennedy was already there with a hoodie over pajamas and her backpack half zipped like a little kid, even though she's almost as tall as me now. I used my mom voice and asked if anyone had tried to stop her, if she was hurt, if she had told her mom she was leaving. She shook her head on all 3. She got in the back and buckled her seatbelt faster than I've ever seen a teenager buckle a seatbelt. On the drive back, she finally said, small and matter of fact, he told my cousin to sit on his lap, and when she laughed he said, "What, you too good for your uncle now?" And then he made us line up for hugs before pizza. She went quiet and stared out the window, and I decided I didn't need any more details that night. I texted Sarah again from my kitchen table, the clock reading 10:38 a.m., letting her know we had Kennedy, that she was safe, that she'd asked to leave because of intoxicated adults in the home, and that she could stay with us until Sarah got back and could pick her up. No immediate reply. I tucked Kennedy on the couch with an extra blanket and told her I was in the armchair right next to her if she woke up at all. Around midnight, Sarah finally called. Her first words were, "Why do you have my daughter?" I told her everything, reading from my own messages like a court reporter so I didn't add anything I couldn't stand by later. She said it was a staff appreciation dinner and she had left her phone in her purse. She sounded angry and also like someone who'd just sprinted to a phone. I told her I wasn't comfortable driving Kennedy back into a house with several men drinking after midnight, and that she was more than welcome to pick Kennedy up from our place, or we could meet at the police station if she preferred. She said she'd be over in 20 minutes. Sarah showed up alone. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying or like she'd just come in from cold wind. She didn't come in. My husband and I stepped onto the porch with her. She said quietly that she'd send everyone home. She didn't apologize for the hour and I didn't expect her to, but she did look over my shoulder at the living room and soften when she saw Kennedy sleeping in a pile of pink blanket and dark. She asked me if I had told anyone else. I told her no, not since I had texted her, and that I would continue to keep this between us unless I had to involve someone for safety. She took a long breath and nodded like she was bracing for a hit that didn't land. Then she asked me if I thought she was a bad mother. It was the first time in all of this I wanted to hug her. I told her no, that bad mothers don't show up alone at midnight to collect their kids from people they don't trust because that's the safest option on the table. We woke Kennedy gently and gave them a minute on the porch. Sarah drove them home. Alina went straight upstairs and cried, not for herself, but for the way a normal Friday went sideways for a girl she loves like a sister. Saturday, right after lunch, the school counselor called me. Kennedy had gone in to talk to her that morning. She'd asked the counselor to call me to confirm that she'd reached out for help the night before and that I had picked her up. The counselor said, and she was very careful here, that she was following her own protocols and that this didn't rest on my shoulders. I answered her questions clearly and factually, and I repeated what I had told Sarah. It felt clinical and a little like being underwater, hearing my own voice recite times and texts and a route to a stop sign. 2 hours later, a woman from Child Services called as well. She said there had been a report filed by a mandated reporter and that she needed a brief account of what had happened for me. I gave it. That was all. I spent the rest of the afternoon wiping down counters that weren't dirty and checking my phone like a madwoman. That evening, Sarah sent a text. It wasn't long. She said she knew I had talked to the counselor, that she had too, that she was going to keep Kennedy close for a while, and that she would appreciate me not hosting any more group things with kids without including Kennedy. I read it 3 times. I told her I understood she needed to do what she felt was best, but I wasn't going to put our social life on hold to avoid a situation created in her home. I said again, because apparently this is the drum I'll beat until my hands bleed, that Kennedy always has a place here, day or night, and that if Sarah needs me to be the boring mom with too many snacks and a strict bedtime so her daughter has somewhere predictable to land, I can be that. Sunday morning, Amy sent me a photo of a police cruiser parked up the block from Sarah's. She didn't add any commentary, and I didn't ask. I took Alina to the farmer's market and we bought too many peaches. On the way home, she asked if Kennedy would be allowed over again. I told her I didn't know and that I wasn't going to make promises I couldn't keep. Monday, Kennedy and Alina sat together at lunch like nothing had happened, or like everything had, and neither of them wanted to let the other see the outline of it. When Alina came home, she said Kennedy asked if the dog could come over to visit her through the fence this week because she misses him. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I don't know where this lands. I don't know what the inside of their house feels like today or next week. I do know that at 10-something on a Friday, when a girl I've made spaghetti for and put band-aids on and driven home from practice texted me to say she didn't feel safe, we went and got her. I can't survive being called a meddler. I can't survive ignoring that text and then seeing her face on a news segment one day and realizing I chose being polite over being useful. If that makes me the house where kids show up at midnight with backpacks and a lie about a sleepover, I'll learn to keep more blankets in the basket by the couch. Update 3. Wednesday morning, the coffee maker was doing that end of cycle hiss and pop when my phone lit up with a number I didn't have saved. It was the investigator assigned to Kennedy's case. She was calm and methodical in a way that made me breathe easier. No dramatics, just, I'd like to schedule a time to speak with Alina in a way that won't disrupt her school day too much. We ended up going in the afternoon to the Child Advocacy Center on the edge of town. The waiting room looked like a pediatric dentist's office from a dream: fish tank, mural of a tree with paper leaves, a stack of highlights from various decades. They asked me my full name 3 times and made a copy of my license and then asked Alina if she wanted water or apple juice. I didn't go back with her for the interview. Apparently parents wait out front while a trained interviewer talks to the kid, but they let me sit where I could see the hallway she'd come down. I watched said 22 minutes. Alina came back with a sticker on her shirt that said brave in cheerful font and with a particular silence I recognized from her after heart exams and flu shots. She squeezed my hand all the way to the car and asked if we could go through the drive-thru for her fries. We did. An hour later, Sarah texted me, and for the first time since all this started, it felt like more than reaction. She said there was a safety plan in place through Child Services, that her husband was staying at his brother's for now, that there was to be no alcohol in the house when minors were present, and that there would be random check-ins. She asked me, very plainly, if she could list me as a secondary contact for Kennedy at school and with a caseworker someone who could pick her up if she needed to leave quickly and Sarah wasn't immediately reachable. I sat on the curb outside the grocery store with a bag of potatoes rolling against my ankle and typed back yes before I let myself think about the 100 ways yes could pull me into things I didn't start. She sent me a photo of the signature page with names blocked out, on the bottom, 2 block letters that you didn't need to be a handwriting expert to make out as a man who signs things he doesn't read. That night, the dog did the half growl, half woof that says, something is outside but I don't know if it's the wind or a raccoon. My husband checked our front camera on his phone and showed me a paused frame of a gray pickup idling across the street. It sat there 2 minutes and change and then rolled away. No one came to the door, no one got out. I sent the clip to the investigator with a short note that just said, for your records, we didn't engage. She replied with a thumbs up emoji, which is somehow both extremely modern and also made me feel like I had put something heavy on a shelf it belonged on. Thursday after school, Kennedy wandered over on the pretext of returning a sweatshirt Alina had let her borrow in 7th grade that none of us had seen since. She stood on my porch and said, "Can I put a bag here?" and held up a brown grocery sack with rolled edges and her name written on it in purple marker. Inside, a spare charger, a toothbrush, a rolled t-shirt, a tiny dog toy with a squeaker that my dog immediately homed in on like it was the Ark of the Covenant. We slid the bag into the basket under the entry table where I keep umbrellas and the emergency flashlight, and I told her it could live there as long as she wanted. She patted the dog and said, "Okay," in the voice people use when they're deciding to let their shoulders drop 1 inch. Friday the school had a home basketball game and the girls go not because they care deeply about free throws but because the concession stand sells Skittles as if they are contraband. I was working the volunteer table by the door stamping hands when I saw Kennedy flatten herself behind the trophy case like a cat that thinks no one can see its tail. A beat later she slid out, kept her eyes on the floor, and said, conversationally, "I forgot peaches." It took me a second and then it clicked: the bag of too many peaches Alina and I bought over the weekend, the word knitted into the weird little weave that only the 4 of us know. I put the stamp down, told the other mom I'd be right back, and walked Kennedy to the office. Through the front glass, I saw her stepdad standing in the parking lot arguing with a security volunteer, both of them using gestures the way teenagers use slang, sloppy and insistent. The vice principal walked out with his clipboard and a smile that had more teeth than warmth. I didn't say anything, I didn't need to. They kept him outside, and a coach walked Kennedy and Alina out the side door 15 minutes later like he was escorting them to a banquet. That night, while I was cleaning splotches of marinara off the stovetop that had somehow gotten underneath the burner, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't have saved. The message was a paragraph of aggrieved self-justification. "This is all a misunderstanding. Certain people are stirring things up. My house is my house, and a request that we sit down like adults so I could see he wasn't the monster Facebook us made him out to be. I showed it to my husband, forwarded it to the investigator without commentary, and blocked the number. My hands were shaking a little, from adrenaline or rage or because I suddenly realized I hadn't eaten since lunch. Saturday afternoon, a woman I didn't recognize knocked on my door and introduced herself as Kennedy's aunt, the cousin's mother. She didn't ask to come in. She stood on the porch with both hands locked around her keys and said she was sorry to show up unannounced, but she wanted to look me in the eye and tell me she had brought her daughter down to the station that morning. There were messages, she said, and the last word came out like something she had to shove past her teeth. From months back. I told myself she misunderstood. I'm done telling myself that. She didn't show me the messages. She didn't need to. I said I was sorry that she had to be brave today. She said, we should have been brave a long time ago, and then shook my hand like we were doing a business deal. After she left, I stood in the entryway staring at the grain in the wood floor until my dog nosed my shin hard enough to remind me I am a person in a house and not a cutout version of one. Sunday morning, I was repotting the plant that has defiantly survived my neglect on the kitchen windowsill when my doorbell rang again. Sarah was there with a pie I have only ever seen at church potlucks and a manila folder the thickness of my thumb. Her eyes were the color of someone who hasn't slept enough in a very long time, but her spine was a line. She said she'd filed for a temporary order keeping her husband out of the house and that he had moved into his brother's officially, not just couch surfing and wandering back in like he was picking a coat off a chair. She asked me if, when the time comes, I would be willing to say what I've already said to the counselor and the investigator in a more formal setting, and whether, if it got messy, I would still answer her calls. I told her I don't have more to say than I've already said, but I can say it clearly, and that her calls will always go through. It felt very grown up and very small at the same time, like signing for a package you didn't order but that you're going to have to make room for somewhere anyway. She didn't cry on my porch. I didn't cry on my porch. We talked about logistics instead, the way people do when the alternative is to slide down a wall and make a sound you can't stuff back in your throat. She asked if Kennedy could keep coming here even if she couldn't send her to parties where she didn't know every adult by first and last name. I told her my living room has a weird dip in one couch cushion that fits Kennedy's hip exactly and that I'm not planning on replacing the couch anytime soon. She smiled, not a whole face smile, but not the careful one either, and then she went home to make phone calls I don't envy. Monday afternoon, on my way to get Alina, the caseworker called to say a check had been done at Sarah's house and that everything was as it should be. She mentioned, almost offhand, that Sarah had put my name down as backup adult on 3 separate forms. I don't think I knew there were 3 separate forms. Now, apparently, there are. I drove the long way to school because I didn't want to sit in the pickup line with my heart in my throat and have nowhere to dispose of it. After dinner, Alina and Kennedy sat at the kitchen table doing homework at the heartbreaking angle that lets you know nothing is normal and they are pretending it is. Alina asked me if we could buy a second toothbrush holder because they keep knocking each other's into the sink. I said yes. They fed the dog blimp noodles and he acted like he had been starved for weeks and then curled up under their feet so that they had to move their chairs gently so they didn't kick him. I don't know if this is the end of the falling action part or the end of the rising action part. I know my front hallway has a bag with Kennedy's name on it, and that my phone has 3 people in it saved as work cell with the same area code, and that my porch light is going to stay on more often than not for a while. I know that last night, when I took the trash out, I stood on the driveway and listened for a truck that didn't come, and that I slept with my ringtone turned up high and my volume of what ifs turned down as low as I could manage. I didn't set out to be anyone's backup plan. But if the choice is between being the house where girls know which cupboard has the extra blankets and being the house where everyone pretends not to hear a door close, I'll keep a stack of clean pillowcases by the dryer and make sure the dog's nails are trimmed so he doesn't click so loud on the hardwood when he tiptoes into the living room at midnight to lay his head on a kid's shins. Update 4. Tuesday at 11:06 a.m. My phone buzzed with the school's number, the tone in the secretary's voice already in that tight register that tells you she's smiling with all her teeth while she talks. She said Kennedy was in the office, that someone had tried to sign her out for a dentist appointment that didn't exist, and could I come by because I was on the list. I grabbed my license and the spare granola bars I keep by the dog treats and drove the long ways so I could blow through one yellow light while telling myself it was just my route now. The lobby smelled like pencil shavings and cinnamon gum. Kennedy was in the good chair by the trophy case doing that thing where you look at your own knee so you don't have to look at anyone's face. The vice principal materialized with his clipboard like a magician pulling a rabbit out of hope and said we had it handled, that campus security had asked the gentleman to leave, plural, because the stepdad had brought his brother as backup like this was a hardware pickup and not a child. The receptionist slid me a laminated sheet I didn't have to read because I knew, already, what it said, no release without Sarah, me, or police. I signed my name in 3 blocks and we walked out the side door where the bus lane looks like a runway. From the far end of the lot, I could see him standing by a gray truck that might as well be a character now. He lifted his phone like he was filming birds. The school resource officer stood 2 feet off his bumper with his feet set in that way that means no one's going anywhere they aren't supposed to. I didn't turn my head. Kennedy didn't turn hers. We got in the car and I let her pick the radio station, and she picked silence. A text from Sarah with a photo of a stack of cardboard boxes and a sheriff's car at a polite angle by her curb. "Civil standby," she wrote. "He's getting the rest of his things." She followed it with, "Thank you," and then, after a bubble that blinked and waited and blinked again, "Please keep her with you until 4. We kill time with fries in the drive-through line where the speaker is always too soft and the person behind you is always too impatient. Kennedy asked me if the dog would be home. I had told her he would be, and that he had gotten into the laundry basket that morning and dragged a sock onto the couch like a prize. She smiled with only one corner of her mouth, but it counted. At 3:30 I opened my front door to a man with a messenger bag and a tie that had lost the will to be crisp somewhere between his car and my porch. "Service," he said, not unkindly, and handed me a manila envelope with my name misspelled just enough that it felt like a near miss instead of a hit. Subpoena. Hearing on the temporary order. The paper was heavier than it looked, it always is. My husband whistled softly, not a tune, just air over teeth, and asked if I wanted tea. I put the envelope on the kitchen island and looked at the groove where a coloring book once bled paint crayon into the wood and thought about how the texture of your house changes once the law knows your address. The hearing was Thursday. I took the day off and sat on a wooden bench in a hallway where every door had a number and a name and a nickname if you listen hard enough. Sarah was already there with a woman who introduced herself as her attorney and who shook my hand like I was a witness and a neighbor at the same time. Kennedy's aunt was in the row behind us with her daughter in a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big for the body inside it. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. When it was our turn, the judge had the face of a man who has seen people try to dress their worst wishes in Sunday clothes and was in no mood for costumes. He asked simple questions and stopped anyone who tried to answer with a story. I said my name and my address and the time on my stove's clock Friday night in the street I parked on. I said I received a text instead of a child I love asked me to come. The aunt said something that made the room colder, only 3 words, about a chat thread, and then the prosecutor asked the judge to extend the no contact. The other side's lawyer tried to make a meal out of the word vibes and found there wasn't enough meat. The judge signed. He held the pen, like a person who knows exactly when to put it down. We filed out past a bulletin board with leaflets for parenting classes and mediation and a flyer for a bake sale some clerk forgot to remove last December. In the parking lot, the gray truck idled 2 rows over, and for a second, I thought I'd have to decide whether to walk steady or fast. A bailiff in a jacket that didn't fit him anymore appeared between us without ever seeming to have walked. "Keep moving," he said to no one in particular, which is to say to all of us. We did. That night, the doorbell chimed in its polite little ding and there was no one on my porch and a folded sheet of printer paper was tucked under my doormat like a fortune under a cookie. The words were the tired one's misunderstanding. Adults, respect, and something that might have been an apology if it hadn't been wrapped so tightly in excuses that it couldn't breathe. I didn't pick it up with my fingers. I used a spatula like I was moving a too thin pancake. I slid it into a gallon zip bag with the same care I use for Lego sets missing one crucial piece, and I sent the investigator a picture. She sent back, "Thank you," and then, after a beat, "We'll note the violation." I made a grilled cheese because I needed to do a thing that in only 2 steps and ended in warmth. Friday's family meeting happened at Sarah's kitchen table, which had a small gouge at the edge like someone banged a mug down harder than they meant to. The caseworker brought a man I didn't know whose card said guardian ad litem and a woman who introduced herself as from a wraparound team, which sounds cozy until you realize it's the bureaucratic way to say we're all watching, kindly. They didn't talk about blame. They talked about tasks. They asked me if I was still willing to be called out of line at the grocery store or from the middle of a dog bath. They put my number with 2 others on a sheet that said safety network, and for a second that made me laugh because I pictured trapeze artists in a red rope. Then I realized that was exactly what it is. Kennedy sat on the step down to the den and flicked the spine of a book with her thumbnail, and when they asked her if she understood what no contact meant, she said, without looking up, "It means don't answer the door even if the person on the other side knows your birthday." Someone wrote that down like it was a line from a training. Saturday morning at exactly 9:02 a.m., my phone showed a location pin from Alina that I hadn't asked for, and then the bubble that said Kennedy coming to walk the dog. Even though the dog was already doing his whole body wag and I could see her through the slats of the fence pretending she hadn't cried before she put on her sneakers. She brought over a backpack this time, not a paper bag, faded navy with a keychain of a tiny stuffed turtle hanging off the zipper. In case I forget peaches, she said out loud in the breezy nothing voice teenagers use when they are carving something in stone. We put the backpack by the basket and I stuck a label inside the top flap with her name in block letters and a date, like a library card, because that's how my brain files safety. At lunch, Sarah texted me from the parking lot of an office building where, by the looks of the window behind the selfie she never meant to take, they were showing a poster about intake. She wrote, "We meet with the assisted dom Monday, and then, this is going to be ugly, and then, do you like lemon bars?" I told her yes to all three, because there are only so many ways to say I'm here without making someone feel like you're promising them a map when all you have is a flashlight. She brought over a square of something with powdered sugar on it and left it on my porch table, and when I picked it up there was a ring of melted frost on the wood like a meteor crater. Sunday afternoon, I ran into the stepdad's brother at the hardware store, of all click places. He was holding a coil of rope, which felt too on the nose even for the universe, and he said, without any preface, "You don't know what's real," like that was a reasonable greeting. I looked at the paint chips in my hand and then at the teenager in the next aisle comparing two different sizes of screws like it was a math problem, and I said, in the tone I use when I'm telling someone where the bathroom is, "All communication should go through the investigator." He said a word I don't let my dog hear and took 1/2 step closer, and a man from 3 at aisles over called out, "Hey, Dan," and suddenly we were just 3 people in a hardware store again, not actors in a reenactment. I bought the wrong size light bulbs on purpose because I needed to make a small mistake that didn't matter and still had an answer. Monday's email from the school had a subject line that started with reminder, and ended with safety protocols. They're going to start checking IDs at after-school games, which will thrill exactly no one and is the exact right move anyway. The principal asked if I would be willing to chaperone the spring dance since I've been at practices as a volunteer and the girls know your face. I said yes before I remembered I hate gym lighting and fruit punch. Alina, when I told her, said, "Please do not dance," and then, after a beat, "But please stand near the door." There are 100 small new normals now. There's a second toothbrush holder on sink with K written in tape that was stood exactly 2 splashes before frilling at the edges. There's a spare collar on a hook for the dog because Kennedy asked if she could learn how to clip it one-handed, and I think because it makes her feel like she has a skill that involves a click and a loop and an end you can't check. There's a sticky note inside my pantry door with 3 names and 1 phrase, "Answer always." Last night I caught myself holding the pie server like a microphone, telling my husband in my kitchen voice about the judge who straightened a stack of papers with the side of his hand, the noise of flat pie that still makes me feel steadier for no good reason. I turned my ringtone back down 1 notch. The porch bulb burned out and I changed it with a ROM light bulb from the hardware store, and now my front step is lit like a stage. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that's exactly what it should be right now, bright enough for anyone walking up with a backpack to see the doormat and the dog in the line where the warm air from the house meets the night.